Without further ado, I'd love to hand off the presentation to our presenters before I start their video.
Okay, hello everybody. Let us introduce us first. My name is Alena. This is my colleague Ingrida, but we call her Inga, and this is Magda. All the three of us, we are lecturers at the Faculty of Arts, University of Prešov in Slovakia. Our field of interest, research interest, is translation, language, linguistics. But in the last couple of years, we've been interested in academic writing, and we've been researching different papers. I mean papers from different fields, from different authors of different nationalities, and we're trying to identify some specific features of the Slovak style, writing style, and how it differs from the Anglo-American convention, as since we are practicing authors and practicing translators, we can see that there are major differences between the two writing styles. So we've prepared 3 presentations. We will take turns in presenting 3 major topics, and then we can continue with discussion. We can answer your questions if there are. So, Annie, please, could we start the first presentation?
Dear colleagues, let us present some outputs of our present research regarding the conceptualization of the Slovak writing style. The 3 of us are lecturers at the Institute of British and American Studies, Faculty of Arts, Prešov University, Slovakia, and practicing translators. We have been involved in writing English and translating scholarly papers from Slovak into English for a couple of decades. We are aware that in the recent years, scholarly publishing has definitely expanded in volume. It may be due to IT advancement or due to an increase in scholarly interest in sharing research. Scholars are expected to share their research results internationally, and this means that they are to submit research reports to international scholarly journals. English has become the primary language used for the exchange of thoughts, the lingua franca of science. However, publishing in English does not mean merely using English as a code. It implies the lingua-culture-specific organization of ideas. So, consequently, a submitted academic paper reflects the author's cognitive style and evidences their native lingua-culture tradition. Based on our personal experience, we see the differences between Slovak and Anglo-American writing styles. For 3 years, we have been involved in the research on academic writing in the Slovak and Anglo-American lingua cultures. The starting point is that in general, the typology of writing cultures includes 4 writing styles: Saxonic, Teutonic, Gallic, Nipponic. The to-date studies describe that these 4 cultures differ in terms of the type of information, text layout, the organization of ideas, or the nature of discourse. To test the stated differences, We conducted research and examined 50 papers in the field of humanities and social sciences. In this first presentation, the findings on the type of information and text layout are given. This includes discrepancies in terms of empirical versus theoretical information, research problem-based versus literature-over-based approach. In the second presentation, the findings regarding the organization of ideas and the nature of discourse are presented, which includes introducing the purpose upfront versus delaying the purpose in the paper, preciseness versus vagueness of the discourse, observing versus neglecting reader-friendly nature. Based on the experiential evidence, conducted research, and to-date studies, the first of the mentioned reflect the Anglo-American mindset. The second of the mentioned apply to other than Saxonic ones. So our research suggests the existence of the conceptual dichotomy of Saxonic versus other than Saxonic writing styles. This sparked our interest in searching for the reason behind this dichotomy, so we focused on the juxtaposition of Anglo-American and Slovak academic writing, which will be presented in the third presentation. Regarding the clash involving the type of information and text layout, we tested the discordance with the following methodology. We randomly selected a scholarly journal and 30 themed papers within that journal. We opted for one journal so that we can collect papers abiding by the same set of instructions for authors regarding the paper structuring. We defined the type of information and text layout through the presence and verbalization of 4 elements. These are a research problem, research aim, research question or hypothesis, and methods. So, based on whether an author explicitly states the research problem, the aim, etc., we can judge whether the paper is based on the research problem or literature overview, which means empirical versus theoretical design of the paper. Our corpus contains papers authored by non-native speakers of English from 13 countries. In our understanding, a research problem is a statement worth exploring, so the existing knowledge of the issue can be expanded. A research question or hypothesis needn't necessarily be used in tandem, as a research question is typically associated with qualitative research and a hypothesis with quantitative research. Research methods don't need to be explicitly named, yet should be at least hinted at through the research procedure or plan. We see them as a necessary element whether the research is largely empirical or theoretical or conceptual. Out of 30 papers, one was written by a native speaker of English. It supplied all 4 pieces of information, including a properly stated aim, whose wording is the study uses to determine. Even though this sentence doesn't contain the word goal or aim, it is implied through the implicit answer to the question why the study is conducted. For the reasons this study was excluded from further analysis. 29 papers were authored by non-native speakers from 13 countries. The countries are not given as representatives of the lingua cultures. They stand for the location of the author instead of giving the author's name. So the results are by no means meant to typify the lingua culture, more research would be necessary. Out of curiosity, we offer a graph illustrating the occurrence of the countries. The number represents the number of papers by authors from these countries. 29 papers offered the following examples of successful statements of research aims. For example, the aim is to demonstrate how something can be used to. The paper offers arguments in defense of, etc. However, we found more examples of unsuccessful research aims, typically mistaking method for aim. For example, the paper aims to analyze. This paper focuses on, and so on. So we consider them unsuccessful if they are stated insufficiently, because they provide little or too vague information. Implicitly, if they are mentioned only in the abstract, not in the text. If they don't provide an answer to the question why, or if they offer information on a method rather than an aim. We tried to calculate the success rate. Each of the items was given the value of 25% if present. If the item was missing, 0% was calculated. If the item was improper or inappropriate or implicit, 12.5%, that is 50% of the default value was calculated. If there were more papers from the same country, the mean value was calculated. The results are specified in the graph, and more specific information is provided in the table. Finally, we calculated a tentative mastery of separate items of analysis. We used this methodology. The presence of the item was weighted as 100, the absence as nil, the proper or implied verbalization as 50. The mean value was calculated. The results are given in this graph. The mastery of the research problem seems to be 48%, research aim 55%, research questions or hypotheses 43%, methods 60%. The findings point at two important facts. First, the author style meets the objectives of the Saxonic style in 51%. Second, the publisher tolerated the interference of the native lingua culture. The possible reason is that, as Shipman argues, in the humanities, as opposed to hard sciences, the observance of the Saxonic style is not strictly insisted on. Also, we need to consider that not all lingua cultures, based on their linguistic tradition, explicitly mention all of the 4 items that we tested. The Slovak language is one of them, as will be illustrated in the second video. Based on our findings, we can only agree with Johann Galtung, who is in comparing the 4 writing style, that is Saxonic in USA and UK, Teutonic in Germany, Gallic in France, and Nipponic in Japan. So he notices that Eastern Europe, including the former Soviet Union, found itself under the influence of the Teutonic intellectual style due to a long historical tradition. In conclusion, with regard to the first and second pairs of differences, the studied papers have manifested the influence of the native lingua culture, even though the language of the paper was English. They were on the borderline between empirical and theoretical type of information, as well as on the borderline of research problem-based and literature overview-based approach. Now, let's move on to the organization of the ideas and the nature of discourse.
The first research study brought some results with regard to the macro structure of a research paper in the two broad groups of writing styles, Anglo-American and non-Anglo-American. It automatically raises the question of what happens on the microstructure level. This may as well be unveiled when a text written by a non-native speaker of English, in our case Slovak, is to be translated into English, and the conventions of an Anglo-American writing style are to be followed. The tentative inference is that problems will occur. During the translation of a text, a translator has to go deeper into the text and identify problems with the organization of ideas and the mere discourse. Our starting point is that English is considered a lingua franca of science, so the primary language of the academic contributions is English. Saying so, we don't imply English used as a code, but English as a bearer of writing conventions. Most authors intending to publish in English are not aware of lingua-cultural conventions of Anglo-American writing style and suppose that it suffices to merely translate in the sense of applying the language and translation competence. However, the translated output should be modified according to the linguistic and pragmatic distinctiveness of the target lingua culture. Hence, a translator has also to take up a role of a linguistic creator and an intercultural mediator. Why is it so? As already mentioned, the literature accounts for four major writing styles: Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, Gaelic, and Nipponic. They are geographically linked with respectively UK and the USA, France, Germany, and Japan. In our previous research, we observed that based on the similarities and differences, two major groups can be established: Anglo-Saxon and non-Anglo-Saxon writing styles. In the Anglo-Saxon or Anglo-American writing style, stating a research problem is a priority, while theoretical information or paradigm formation is backgrounded. The aim is clearly stated at the very beginning. The language is precise and specific so that reader friendliness is maintained. The text is based on research problem statement in all text types: empirical, theoretical, and conceptual. In the non-Anglo-Saxon styles, it is vice versa. The text is based on the literature review, theoretical information and paradigm formation is prioritized, while research problem is backgrounded, delayed, or omitted. The language is vague, generalizing, and descriptive. Reader friendliness is not an issue. This was the launching pad for our research. The research corpus contains 20 papers submitted for translation to the three of us. The papers fell in the field of humanities and social sciences. The authors were Slovak natives, non-professional users of English. We followed the following research plan. Out of the submitted papers, we randomly selected 20 papers. We carried out the pre-translation analysis, consisting of semantic translation that provided us with a mental toolkit, which enabled us to identify translation problems. Then we translated the papers, opting for translation solutions that would account for the target lingua culture. The last step was to do a meta-analysis of a translator's choices in order to identify macro and micro stylistic conventions. The analysis yielded four most obvious signals of the clash between Anglo-American and Slovak writing style: pluralis auctoris, baroqueness, paragraph structure, and multiple standpoints. When conceptualizing author self-presentation, the typical feature of the Slovak academic text is so-called pluralis auctoris or pluralis modestiae, which means that pronoun we is used to refer to a single author, as illustrated in the example. The assumed function of such usage is depersonalizing the research or backgrounding the researcher and foregrounding the research. We may wonder, is this supposed to represent some kind of political correctness in academic discourse? In the translation into English, we have to make a shift in the mindset and use the pronoun I instead, as in the Anglo-Saxon lingua culture. The researcher blatantly expresses responsibility for their research and also courage and assertiveness to interact. The feature of baroqueness was first mentioned by Čmejrková in the 1990s. She provides illustration, yet not its definition. We understand it as too much of everything. We define it through the following signals: threefold repetition principle, padding, artificial elaborateness, and matryoshka effect. The present example is literal translation of the text by a prominent Slovak linguist. The threefold repetition can be present in synonyms, paraphrases, dashes, predicates, attributes, and so on. Notice that the given paragraph contains two sentences. One is given in black, another one in white. Padding is taken to represent micro-stylistic redundancy from the perspective of English. We have identified padding on the level of a phrase, a part of a clause, and a whole clause. Here you can see some examples of padding. By artificial elaborateness, we mean pretentious language, which is very popular among long-established Slovak scholars. And by the term matryoshka effect, we call attention to the fact that the gist is hidden in the bulky language and more often than not delayed until the end of the paper. In the Slovak lingua culture, paragraphing is present in stylistics literature, yet it is not adhered to in practice, as we have observed. The example illustrates a disorderly approach to paragraphing, whether with regard to the number of paragraphs, structure of a paragraph, number of topics, and consequently in the underdevelopment or overdevelopment of a paragraph. In the Anglo-American writing style, strict instructions on the internal structure of a paragraph or paragraph ordering are followed. The research shows that the Slovak mindset is such that the paragraph arrangement is a tool of pursuing author's voice, and the length of a paragraph or separating an idea is a means of emphasis for them. So, unpredictability is almost inherent, which is, in our view, in contrast with respect for reader and with the responsibility for full information transfer. By multiple standpoints, we mean two notions: multiple topics in a paper or even in a paragraph, and multiple reference authors. In the first case, there is no narrowing down. The text is too general and vague. In the second case, no novel perspective or approach is present. In some papers, it may look like a spiral development of topics. moving and coming back. This is in sharp contrast with the Anglo-American writing style, which prioritizes narrowing down, identifying a niche, and presenting new information. The observed features require some text modification, which can be termed voice creation. This can be understood as a competence since the translator needs to be able to identify problems and pursue changes. To do so, mediation has to take place. The translator needs to explain to the author that the intended changes will make the text compatible with the target lingua culture writing style while preserving the author's voice. The job of a professional translator necessitates the combination of his or her knowledge, expertise, and skills. With new discourse types that automatically bring new functions, also new tasks are imposed on the translator. In translating the scholarly paper discourse, a translator needs to incorporate and negotiate a particular voice, so the competence of voice creation is necessary. We see the competence of voice creation as an intercompetence encompassing conceptualization, linguistic, cultural, and strategic competencies. Alternatively, an author can prepare the manuscript in such condition that minimum changes during translation would be necessary. A question arises why Slovak authors find it difficult to adjust their writing style to the conventions of Anglo-American writing style. After obtaining some results on the macrostructure and microstructure levels, we have decided to search for the reasons that cause these existing discrepancies.
Scholars often speak or write a foreign language, but their mindset is still that of the mother tongue. They non-consciously adopt a certain linguistic tradition, but they don't adapt it to a different lingua culture. A question may arise why the adaptation process is very often troublesome. We can find an answer through exploring the native linguistics tradition. The starting point is becoming successful in providing the architecture of papers using English as a lingua franca that would be Saxonic-like. We aim to provide the conceptualization of the Slovak academic writing style based on the analysis of the Slovak tradition of linguistics. We consider this a prerequisite for defining the parameters that distinguish the Saxonic versus Slovak academic writing. Our aim is to unveil the roots of a clash between Slavic and Anglo-American conceptualization of an academic paper as a genre. So the presentation is conceptual in nature. As we have already mentioned, in our understanding, an Anglo-American academic writing is an autonomous discipline, and an academic paper manifests these features. Its priority is to state a research problem. Theoretical information or apparent information tend to be neglected. Its argumentation is inductive. The presented information is empirical in nature. Its text is based on a research problem, its language is precise and specific, and reader friendliness is a must. The results of our analysis show that in the Slovak linguistics tradition, any treatment of writing styles seems to be part of stylistics. Moreover, an English academic essay seems to have no compatible treatment in the Slovak academia. In Slovak stylistics, we attribute this issue to mistreat and his seminal work. It is built upon three notions. First, Stil, meaning text type, though its literal translation into English is style. Second, Slohový útvar, meaning genre, but its literal translation is form of composition. And third, Slohový postup, meaning technique, yet its literal translation is the procedure of composition. Mistrik's notion of text type classifies texts as falling within three major groups: objective, objective-subjective, and subjective ones, based on the type of the author's involvement. The Slovak typology of text types presupposes a set of genres, that is, actual products related to a specific text type. We'll present it in a little bit. So a Slovak paper is the amalgam of the three notions, and in the following slides, we will show you what is at the base of this overlap. As we have mentioned, the Slovak typology of text types presupposes a set of genres, that is, actual products related to a specific text type. Slovak stylistics enumerates these text types: academic text, business writing, journalistic writing, speech styles, belletristic rhetoric, vernacular language, and bell-letter text. These terms are translated by us based on the conceptualization of the Slovak terms. In the table, for each term, the original Slovak term and its literal translation is provided. The second column contains genres linked to these text types. For example, academic text type occurs in these genres: a thesis, a dissertation, a lecture, a discussion, a review, dictionary, and so on. The third major notion in Slovak stylistics is technique. Let us look at this term more closely. In our view, the Slovak term Slohový postup, literally the procedure of composition, is a linguistic malapropism. When considering its translation into English, the first idea is that it means the process of composition. Only secondarily, we assume that it may also refer to a method, a technique. The disambiguation can be achieved through the scheme of the conceptualizing process. This conceptualizing scheme contains 4 steps of analysis. First, frame, which means the field that the term belongs to. Second, definition, that is the explanation of what the concept of the term stands for in the source language. 3, exemplification. And 4, functional translation. As you can see, Slovak stylistics uses the term technique. However, it does not imply, or the Slovak tradition does not supply, the mere process of composition. If a writer hopes to get information on how specifically a certain text is composed, what steps need to be taken, this term or this concept doesn't imply this information. The combining of the 3 notions provides the typology of texts as understood in Slovak linguistics. The tinted areas illustrate the overlapping between Anglo-American and Slovak notion of academic writing. This indicates that Slovak genres of academic texts are not treated within an autonomous discipline. Rather, they are interpreted as variations of a specific text type used in the scientific educational environment. and characterized by accuracy and objectivity of information. In a summary, in the Slovak setting, academic writing has not been established as a separate discipline. Slovak stylistics tradition recognizes text types based on language functions. Each text type is described through certain features, so it includes specific genres. It is linked with a certain writing technique or strategy. The three make a dialectical relationship within which an academic essay, as a specific genre of Anglo-American academic writing, can be attributed to a specific combination of a particular text type, genre, and technique. However, it is not a true parallel. This combination provides a writer with information regarding content, not with writing process related information. This may relate to the fact that the Slovak tradition of writing styles is rather product oriented. It offers an array of typologies or classifications of styles, genres, etc. The orientation on the mere writing process, in the sense of argument development, paragraph development, voice establishment, or economy of expression, including features like padding or redundant language, baroqueness or abundance of language, multiple standpoints, are absent. Consequently, the writing process is very individual and the product is idiosyncratic. We think this calls for a change in the curriculum design in the Slovak academia and for a new methodology of academic writing for Slovak users of English. As it can be seen, the linguistic tradition sets the standards based on which others approach writing tasks. Slovak papers are often rejected by international journals since they don't conform to the publisher's Anglo-American mindset. Our aim is to raise awareness of the lingua-cultural differences in the writing styles and hopefully start a discussion whether or not it is possible to accommodate the standards, or at least to what level, to enable authors of non-Anglo-American background to succeed internationally. This also emphasizes the need to verbalize what actual academic writing skills are, what academic writing competence involves. Academic writing competence is supposed to be a key competence of those pursuing their career in the academia. However, this is not as automatic as it may seem, or inherent, or intuitive. This is a skill that needs to be learned, but the training is absent in most higher institutions in Slovakia. This takes us to the idea of transforming the curriculum or introducing the Anglo-American academic writing into study programs of different fields. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. Well, there were many topics mentioned, and it may be confusing for you. So maybe just a very brief overview of what we wanted to share with you. Our starting point is that there is a major gap in understanding the differences between, or actually being aware of the fact that there are different writing styles. When we read the papers of Slovak authors, we realize that they tend to think that everybody can have their very own writing style. And when they ask us to translate that, and if we translated them literally, there might be at risk that the paper comes back to them with the comment that the English is poor. So we need to explain to them that it's not the language that is a problem, that it might be the organization of ideas and the understanding of the separate parts of the paper, the function of these parts, the function of paragraphs, and the mere expressing of their ideas. I mean, choosing the appropriate language. So that's why we decided to do research into this. And after reading, translating, analyzing many papers, we realized it must be the tradition that is a problem here. And that's why we decided to study the tradition of stylistics, Slovak stylistics. And as you could see, the result is that there is no such thing like taking a writer through the process of writing, in the sense of the process of the drafting, as to introduce, support, conclude, and so on. So we tried to put together the main results of our research and to show you what we have arrived at. So if there are any questions, we are ready to answer them.
Hello, I'm Kamila Kinyan. I'm originally Czech. I'm from Prague, and I have a doctorate in Slavic studies. And now for about 15 years, I've been teaching first-year writing at the University of Denver. So I'm really was very interested in your presentation and in these kind of differences. I've taught English as a second language for a long time. These kind of differences in argumentation and in structuring academic papers. So my question was concerning kind of different subgenres within the academic paper. So one thing that we really kind of teach our students, like who are all like American, is how many different conventions there are based on discipline, based on within the academic paper. So for example, I teach ethnography and autoethnography, and that's like one genre that really kind of breaks down some of the expectations our students have of what an academic paper is, you know, because it uses a lot of personal narrative. It doesn't have like a thesis up front. And so, you know, I even give them examples. Here's a sociology journal versus an anthropology journal, and the expectations might be completely different. So I was just wondering what you've encountered within the academic kind of paper genre. And you said for some of your study, you kind of randomly selected a journal that had both qualitative and quantitative kind of papers. So what kind of work you've done with kind of these kinds of differences within different disciplines and the different expectations for those?
We deal with the papers in the humanities. So mostly it's in linguistics and translation studies, but we also come across papers from the field of history, literature, philosophy, aesthetics. Of course, social work, yes. So each field has their understanding of what a paper should look like. And based on this, they structure the paper. So, of course, as translators, we cannot change the structure of the paper, but at least we can advise the author to for example, emphasize a certain idea, introduce a certain idea, and so on. But the papers that we analyzed were mostly from linguistics and social work, I think.
Yeah. And so they seem to have like a unified kind of set of expectations for the journal.
Well, I've been reading in the last couple of days. I've been reading, for example, these are of course not included, but it's just my recent experience. I've been reading about 20 papers from aesthetics, and I just reassured myself that the authors just put ideas in separate paragraphs, but they do not introduce the reader to the ideas that they're going to present. And I think this is a common feature of Slovak authors, that they keep something as a secret. They don't introduce the structure of the paper, the topics of the paragraphs. So the reader reads and learns of new points as the reader goes through the paragraph. So I think even though in different fields, even though they differ in whether the research is quantitative or qualitative or theoretical, I guess this is a common feature that they do not, I don't want to say pay attention to the reader. They are just not accustomed to this step, just to give the introductory paragraph to say that I'm going to deal with this and this and that, and the reader will find these ideas there, but it's not so in Slovak. The reader learns more and more things as they go through the text.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I really appreciated the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I ask a related question?
Sure.
Hi, my name is Irica. I'm originally from Bulgaria. I know you, Elena.
It's unbelievable after 15 years, I guess.
My PhD is in rhetoric, so I teach a lot of writing, just like Camila. I teach first year, last year, all kinds of writing classes for in a US oriented institution. My question has to do with the translation and the how that process works, because you were talking about the you were comparing this it was very interesting, your presentation, how intricate and how detailed and wonderful it was. What I am curious about is how do you get to communicate to the authors of these articles while they're in the process of writing? Because maybe that would be helpful, all the data and everything that you have collected, and about these differences between the writing conventions. Perhaps they could, and I guess the adoption is you just get the papers and it's a service you do when they're done, when it's already difficult, unless they allow you to do conceptual editing or editing.
Okay, so we may continue. We contact the author. Their major concern is that they will somehow lose their individual voice when translated into English, when we tell them what adjustments there have to be. So we try to negotiate and to persuade them that we will not steal their voice. Instead, we are going to give them an English voice. So we try to preserve all the individual features of expression. We only what we do, we try to reorganize the paper, the ideas, and to add some more cohesion. So the study, the paper makes a unified whole rather than a collection of ideas that at first sight may seem not related, not really related. I think Inga may add something.
Thank you so much. So we as practicing translators, but also as scholars who do research into translation studies and translator studies, view also translating research papers also from the perspective of translator. And there are two things that should be mentioned. First thing that we realized is that translating research papers from different fields requires engagement not only of this core and basic translation competencies, because there are several schemes and systems and taxonomies of core or basic nuclear translation competencies. But this work of translating research papers requires also competencies that are specific, and we call them edge competencies. It's because they aren't included in these very basic taxonomies. They are specific and require some other expertise of translator. So, for example, competence of voice creation. And we also identify several other edge competencies based on the type of the text that is translated. Second thing that should be mentioned is that translation of research paper requires not only the specific competencies, these edge competencies, as we call them, but besides competencies, this work requires also negotiating of certain powers. Yes, because if we are aware of these differences between Slovak and Anglo-American tradition in academic writing, then we as translators have to negotiate powers in the sense of some powers to maybe to modify something. Yes, we cannot modify the text without negotiating it with the author. But if we are, for example, about these differences on micro stylistic level, as we mentioned in the presentation, I mean the issue of redundancy, lexical redundancy. Yes, we Slovaks, we love this baroqueness, this very, I will say, baroque language, too many words in one sentence. And we as translators and as scholars, we know that it doesn't work so in Anglo-American tradition. So we have to negotiate it, and this requires certain powers. So there are two things that should be, like, I would say, discussed and mentioned, specific, so edge competencies, and then specific powers when translating research papers. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I have noticed, sorry, Alexa, would you like to ask anything else?
No, that's great. I was just wondering about how acquainted your writers are with the conventions of the journal, let's say, where they're submitting, or if you help them in the process. And I do understand that there are a lot of competencies that are needed. And since you have them, I was just wondering if it is the dialectical process where you're working with them while they're writing or not, or they just deliver it as a product, because that's already very difficult on you.
We're trying to teach our clients that they need to talk to us, that they need to communicate with the translator, that it's not just like giving a job to someone, but it's also about communication and about approving some changes, so that the result is they're going to be satisfied with the result, and also so the journal is satisfied with what they submit. So this is our, I would say, a new strategy to work with the authors, to tell them that they need to communicate with the translator, not just leave the piece and let it have a translator translate that. I have noticed the question in the chat, a question from Joel. Sorry if I pronounced it wrongly. And maybe the answer to this question, let me read it for everybody. Have you found any resistance in English language journals to articles already published in Slovak? Have you seen specific references in peer reviews to this clash of mindsets or writing competencies? Maybe one example that I can provide is what is typical of the Slovak writing. At least this is my experience with doctoral students, because I teach writing for doctoral students, is that it's very difficult for Slovak students to realize, to understand what a research problem is. Very often they want to submit a paper that is some kind of compilation of theoretical information and doesn't elaborate on a problem, on a research problem that can be considered a niche, a gap in the knowledge. It's something that the students think that they need to talk about everything. They need to mention everything in the paper. And if they write and have a paper translated, then of course it is rejected, or the peer reviews are not favorable, because this misunderstanding that they need to focus and they need to deal with research problem. This is something that has to be taught. Our students don't or can't do it just by themselves. I guess the education system is not such. Maybe it's this again. It's about the tradition in stylistics that we don't teach our students in the primary and secondary schools to think in this way. And I guess we've already answered the second question. Do you feel like any of their voice can be lost in the reorganization, or do you think it's easy to preserve it? So we're trying not to lose their voice. We are just trying to make them heard, but in English. So it is. So this English voice is pleasant to say. Let's say it like that. To journals publishing in English.
Okay. I would like to add that maybe this has something to do with the system of education, maybe spanning through the elementary, secondary, and higher education, that there is still too much focus on encyclopedic knowledge, and rather than analytical and analytical thinking. So the students are not encouraged or are not expected to analyze a piece of text and to find the most important thing, and maybe to infer from the text something or some information that is contained between, or can be inferred from reading between the lines. So they this is what I understand is the experts in Slovak education system are working on, to make it closer to what the most advanced countries are like, or the education systems in the most advanced countries are like, and to educate independently and creatively thinking and reasoning individuals. So it's making people more, making students. It starts from the very early stages of education, making pupils and students think and reflect on what they have learned, and create opinions, and just encouraging them to ask questions rather than
passively absorb knowledge. So there is a lot of there are a lot of things in the package that we have presented.
We have another question here. Let me read it. I'm also interested in who controls the copyright in Slovakian journals of the article that students may later submit in English. Well, I'm afraid, unfortunately, there is no such a system.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have well. It depends, because if we speak about teachers who work at universities, this is controlled by the system administered by the Ministry of Education. But this is because I, as a lecturer at the Prešov University, if I want to have my paper registered in to have a list of publications that I have produced during a particular year, I need to have it registered in the library. And the library automatically checks whether it has been published elsewhere in a different language. So for those who are employed in the academia, this is done through the national system that the Ministry of Education runs. But in students, if they just want to have something published, I'm not sure. I don't think there is any mechanism for that.